Sephrat and the divine feminine, you see that the Sephrat gives an idea of there being a cosmic consciousness. So the very top part of the Sephrat right here at the top, this is Keter. It's considered the crown, or Ein Sof, which is the ultimate Godhead. This is the beginning of all things in the scheme of our cosmos. And Ein Sof is the ultimate Godhead, which has no beginning and no end. So he's considered the point of nothingness, and from nothingness, consciousness was birthed. So you could maybe think of like the Big Bang and how scientists theorized that there was this explosion, and from that explosion, everything came into existence. The Sephrat comprises the divine masculine and feminine union that balances the cosmos. The left side of the cosmos is the left side of the Sephrat is the feminine side of consciousness, and the right side would be the masculine side. In the middle elements, that's where we find there's a balance of the cosmic consciousness. When the left side, while it looks like there's just a left side and a right side, which is feminine and masculine, we find that the two sides, which are emanations of the Godhead, they actually empty into the middle, which create the Tiferet and Malkut, which are both masculine and feminine. So the masculine and feminine meet in the middle. At the very top of this, when you think of the cosmological scheme of things, or if you think about God as the very beginning of all things, the Sephrat is an emanation of all of God's characteristics. So you see that the first aspect of God's being is that there's wisdom, and then wisdom, you have understanding, which is kind of like balances it out. And then Binah, she is the divine, the first of the divine feminine. And Benign is the divine mother of all of the other emanations. And she actually receives the seed from Hakma, wisdom, and wisdom and understanding come together to conceive the lower seven of the Sephrat, which is going to be the following we're going to talk about here. They're actually called Hasid and Din. Here you see on this diagram here that it's called Guvara, but that's just another name for it. It's also called Din, which is justice and judgment, and Hasid is love and mercy. These are considered the right and left arms of God. It's two sides of the divine personality, which is free-flowing love and strict judgment, grace and limitation. These are love and judgment are necessary for the world to function. In the balance of Hasid and Din, we find the conception of Tifrat, which is beauty. Tifrat is it's the trunk of the Sephrodic body, and it's also considered the blessed Holy One, which is a common rabbinic name for God. The Tiferet is also called Rahaman, which is compassion, which is God's emanated compassion for the world. Tiferet remains balanced as long as he receives an equal and healthy influx of Hasid and Din, which is love and judgment. However, if judgment is not softened by love, it's said in the Zohar that Din lashes out and threatens to destroy life. This is the origin of evil. This is where the origin of evil would be created, according to the Zohar. It's called Sitra Abra, or the other side. So you would literally see if these two here are unbalanced, love and mercy, justice and judgment, you would see that Tifrat is where the manifestation of evil would begin. The presence of evil or demonic forces is birthed, obviously, in the unbalanced divine cosmological system. Tiferet here is the Sephrodic trunk or the body, and it's also sorry, I messed up. I apologize. The Tiferet actually empties itself into Had and Netzah, and it goes into Yesod, which is the foundation, or it's actually like the phallus of the Sephrodic system, which empties itself into Malkut. And when it goes into Malkut, that's actually Shekinah. That is the divine, the feminine divine. Shekinah she reflects all 9 of the Sephrat. It says just as the moon, which has no light of its own, reflects the rays of the sun. So she's very important. So even though she's at the bottom, as you see, she kind of reflects everything up to the top where Keturah is. So she's the opposite of Keturah. So she is literally the feminine, the mother of all consciousness. According to the themes of the Zohar, Shekinah would essentially be God's soulmate, twin soul, or other half of himself, and without her, God is incomplete. According to the Zohar, human consciousness is said to be birthed through the connection of Tiferet and Malkut. Shekinah is the mother of all human consciousness, and the union of the divine couple is effected by righteous actions and it's destroyed by sin. So in the very beginning, you can see where the Bible or the Torah talks about Adam and Eve and the sin that was there. In Hebrew, Adam actually means humankind, and Eve would be the beginning. So it's not really talking about a man and a woman. It's talking about all humankind in the beginning of sin. So from that very beginning there, we've seen that the divine feminine existed, and she was there with the Godhead, and the consciousness of humankind was birthed through them. But when they sinned and when they had unrighteous actions, it created the imbalance of the cosmological system, which as a result, the origin of evil caused there to be a birth of souls that were different than anything else that had ever existed. So that's why we see in the Bible or in the Torah that God tells Israel that if they break his covenant, that he'll set his face against them. Human sin was there from the very beginning, and it tells us in the Zohar that when the female energy is apart from the male energy, the souls, as I said before, released from her are different than those that were issued before, that were created before. I would think of this as like good and evil, or us having the ability to have free will. And in the paper I wrote on this, I kind of touch on this, is that it's human nature to sin. And through that sin and through our human nature, we created, according to the Zohar, the separation of Tiferet, or the separation of God from the feminine divine. Shekinah, according to the Zohar, she always follows her people. She follows her children. She's the mother that hovers over her children, and she doesn't want to leave them because they're so important to her. And it says in the Zohar and some of the literature, it says that even from the very beginning, that when Adam and Eve and their family was exiled from the Garden of Eden, she would have went with them. And then when Israel was exiled, Shekinah would have went with them as well, because her presence has always been with the people. So, see here. So, according to the themes of the Zohar, it is up to humankind to repair the damage, or to basically bring a completion of God. So it's up to us to repair everything. It's humans' participation in the creative process that allows us to fix what's been damaged. And that's basically what I have here. I don't know how to exit it. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. And Rhonda, if you don't mind, can you go back, please, to the beginning? Because I started recording, I think, after the introduction. So if you don't mind, just put the title and go through the brief introduction to the author of the supposed author of the Zohar, because he has been controversial in regards to whether or not he was the real author. And maybe you can explain what is this controversy about, whether or not he was the real author of the Zohar or not.
Personally, so definitely, I wrote about within my paper that I have for this. I did touch on the debate of authorship with this particular situation. So essentially, what occurred was back, I think it was in the late 1200s, close to the I would say late 1200s, close to the 1300s. Moses de Leon was handing out manuscripts that he claimed were ancient words of wisdom from an ancient scribe. And I apologize, I don't recall his name, but that is in my paper, and I don't have that in front of me. And it was a very important rabbi from the 1st or 2nd century. And he had told all the people in Spain that were receiving this manuscript that he was the one, or that he had the original manuscript, and that he was copying it and handing it out. Well, during this time, there was a massacre or something that happened in Israel, and there was a gentleman who came over who heard about the, I think his name was Isaac of Acre. He heard about the manuscript that Moses de Leon was handing out or selling, and he wanted to see it for himself. So he ended up hunting down Moses de Leon, and he found him and was told that when he got home, they could meet up and he would show him the manuscript. Well, before he had a chance to see it, he found out that Moses de Leon had passed away. So he went to, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was, I want to say, I've been there before, I just forget the name of it. I apologize, I forget the name of it, but he went to where it was that Moses de Leon was living at that time, and he asked for the manuscript. And the woman there told them that she had attempted to bargain with the widow of Moses de Leon, and she had offered her son to the woman's daughter in marriage if she would give her the manuscript. And so Moses de Leon's widow told her at that time that she couldn't give them the manuscript because there never was a manuscript. She allegedly told them that he wrote everything from his mind, and that she questioned him as to why he would write this from his mind and claim that it was someone else's, because he would have more notoriety if he just told them that it was his own thoughts that he was writing. Well, he didn't agree. He thought that in order for anyone to be interested in buying these words or these thoughts, that it had to be someone of importance that wrote them. Sounds to me like he didn't have enough faith in his own thoughts. So in that early time, a lot of the people truly believed that this ancient rabbi from the 1st or 2nd century had wrote this, and that he was really copying from a old manuscript that he had in his possession. But the writings of Isaac of Acre, I think that's right, he basically said, that he believed strongly that these writings were the ideas and thoughts of Moses de Leon. So there has been, some questions about what writings actually belong to Moses de Leon from the Zohar and which ones did not. So Gresham Scholem actually wrote extensively about this. He spent about 15 years researching the writings of Moses de Leon and looking at the Zohar, and he has essentially concluded that he believes that a majority, if not all, of the writings were the work of Moses de Leon. I think there was a couple that I forget his first name, but Wolfson, I think is what it is. He writes about and says that Scholem agreed he did not write, but for the most part, the entire Zohar they believe was written by Moses de Leon. But that there's still people out there who speculate that there may be some truth to the original story. But for the most part, the scholars have agreed with Scholem in saying that Moses de Leon was the author of the Zohar. And Scholem based that off of more than just the works. And I go into this in my paper, he basically he looked at like the type of writing, the way that they compared, the cross-referenced them, and just like the nature of how they sounded and so forth. And he says that there was so many similarities that's why he believes strongly that Moses de Leon was the author of these transcripts in this book. So.
By the way, I might say that if anyone is interested in reading her paper, there is a good chance that her article will be published I think it's by the end of the year, right? When they have the next publication, but her paper was accepted for possible publication in the journal, the undergraduate journal, Omnino, right? So if you want to read her article, hopefully it will get published by the end of the year.
I'm working on the edit of it right now, so.
That's right. So big congratulations again.
I was going to try to exit this for you guys.
Thank you very much, Rhonda.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question. I mean, this is really way out of my depth here, and so I've got. If I ask stupid questions, I apologize ahead of time for that. But the crown, is that pronounced the keter?
It's Keter. That's how I always pronounce it. I'm assuming that's right. No one's ever corrected me. So,
is there a creation story there? Or was it that it had always been there and always will be there, or was there a creation story involved with it?
Oh, there's no creation story. From what I've read, it's Keter is nothingness. There's no point. There's nothing. It's nothingness. So literally, there is no creation story. It's just an always existing. So for me, I think of it as like I kind of mix a lot of different thoughts into this. So, and I can't say that mysticism would necessarily agree with me, but I think of it as like, for one, I think of consciousness as a dualistic system. So you have your body, the physical working body, and then you have consciousness. And then I think about fractals, because it's the brief stuff that I've looked at on fractals, you see fractals are literally in everything in our cosmos and in our universe. And fractals are created under chaos. And they say that when you look at fractals, fractals are literally the image of chaos. So if you think of the very beginning of there being nothingness, and you think of that Big Bang, then you would say the nothingness would have been the Godhead. It would have been, God. And then you have the fractal, or the explosion of chaos, which would have created a fractal of what I would say consciousness and all things that exist. And I think that God is literally consciousness, and that it fractals off for infinity, and that even like, for instance, humans are fractals. So when you have a child, your child's a part of a fractal. So we would be the same. Our consciousness, what inhabits our bodies, is a fractal of the divine consciousness of God himself. So we are literally a part of the Godhead. So outside of our physical bodies, I think we would be in our purest state. But inside of our bodies, we struggle with that human nature, because we're human and we can't get past it until we remove ourselves from our body. And if you look at, Steve, you and I have talked separately about the near-death experience stuff. And if you look at some of the reports of people who've had near-death experiences, the one thing they say is that during cardiac arrest and when they're dead, essentially, they describe it being the most realest thing that they've ever felt. So for someone who has no pulse, no brain waves, and they're literally dead, and for that to feel the most realest thing they've ever felt, it tells me that consciousness, our conscious state, is the most purest state that we will ever experience. But us manifesting into these physical bodies takes away from that experience. And I think that's why in Buddhism they say there's no such thing as self, because you always lose yourself every time you incarnate. So I would say, to answer your original question, no, there is no creation or beginning. There's just nothingness, and from nothingness fractaled out all of consciousness. Yeah.
He gives good answers. The reason I ask is when you were first saying that, I had just been reading some quantum mechanics stuff that was kind of fun to read. And there is some quantum mechanics about virtual particles that talk about the less in a state of nothingness, when they were talking about nothingness. Now, this is just pure physics we're talking about here, that virtual particles can appear and disappear out of nothingness. And the more complete the nothingness, their math shows that there's a more energetic particle. So in a total nothingness environment, there is a possibility of a total a total energy particle appearing out of nowhere. And they're putting that forward as the beginning of a Big Bang kind of thing. And something in the start of your talk there made me, you even mentioned the Big Bang there. So I just thought it was very interesting that maybe if you ever want to read a little quantum mechanics, something about virtual particles appearing out of nothingness, that would be a interesting little add-on for that. But
yeah, I do like the quantum mechanics part of it, and I am interested in learning more about that. And I do think for me, like when I started at Valdosta State doing religion, I struggled with trying to transition with my personal experiences, understanding what I thought religion was at this point, and understanding what I thought consciousness was. And for me, reading Jewish mysticism and understanding the Sefrat helped me to transition into a firmer understanding of consciousness and not being so afraid to question religion. So I think that when you look at religion and you take it at face value, like I used to, you tend to get lost and you don't see the bigger picture. But when you step back and you look at the way Jewish mysticism describes the Sefrat and the divine feminine and the masculine energies, I think that what we can see is a better idea of how our true nature of self corresponds with science, physics, and being able to understand what we are and what we really are. I remember I used to think of it as, just you imagine God as like this like human figure in the sky that that just fixes everything. And to me, I feel like more this particular theory that I am embracing, it feels more like I'm more connected to God rather than being separate from and apart from God. So I feel like I have more control over my life when I think of myself as pure consciousness that's actually connected to that Godhead. So now when I think of, before I didn't know how the Big Bang would fit into that bigger picture, but now when I think of nothingness and when I think of how God fits into that bigger picture, it makes sense to me. I can see how science and God can both exist at the same time, whereas before I couldn't figure out how they could, but now I can definitely see it. And I just hope that in time other people can see that God as nothingness, as consciousness, could literally exist and also coexist with everything science and physics is showing us. Because if we pay attention, it's trying to answer questions that we have, but we have to be willing to accept the answers. And sometimes we don't want to accept those answers. So, yeah.
Very good. Very good. That is the big jackpot question, consciousness, awareness, what happens to it? Where does it go? Where do we go? And so everybody seems to be looking for that. So thank you very much. I learned a lot. That was something I was totally unfamiliar with. Now I know a little bit about it. I'm proud of myself. Thank you.
Well, it's just my thoughts. I don't know if it's actually anything to teach yet, but, I did reach out to Dr. Grayson at the University of Virginia recently and kind of shared some of my thoughts with him and told him of some programs or some, I don't know, like things that I want to do. And hoping that kind of works out so that maybe what I want to do is I want to try to create I don't even have the right words for it right now, but I guess like a trial test run to see about near-death. Okay, like, so me and you talked about near-death experience before. I've described to him that I would like to do like regression on people who died or had cardiac arrest and were brought back, but did not experience a near-death experience. Because I don't think that the absence of the experience means that it did not occur. I think that memory is just very sketchy. And I think that by having the regression therapy and comparing that to the incidents in the hospital room, we could see if they actually do remember something, even though they were clinically dead. And if they do remember something, even though they were clinically dead, then I think that would show us that consciousness that conscious experience during clinical death is happening for everyone. And if it's happening for everyone, they're just not remembering it, then we can show that there's a disconnect between the physical brain that's recording memory and the consciousness that's inhabiting the body. And so he said he was interested in it. Now I just have to see what happens next. So we'll see.
Let us know. Update us on that, please.
Yeah. So my hope is that eventually we'll be able to prove that consciousness is separate from the body, and then go from there. So.
That sounds right intuitively. Let us know, because you're right. Absence of evidence does not mean a lack of proof of non-existence. So.
Yeah. Those are my thoughts. So, and I think that Jewish mysticism kind of helps me show that.
One very important question, though. Do you think that picture of Moses de Leon, do you think if he cut the beard off and wore glasses, wouldn't he look a little like Dr. Pagan, I'm thinking?
Definitely.
Maybe I don't know, man. Or just the serious look in his eye. That's probably what it is. You did a good PowerPoint. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Steve, I thought that if you change it, it looks more like Don Cervantes in El Quijote. By the way, we know now that Cervantes actually came from a Jewish background, and he lived in the Jewish quarter in Alcalá de Henares, where he was born. So there is a Jewish connection to the story of Don Quixote and Cervantes. But in the Jewish mystical tradition, they call it the breaking the vessels, right? And there is a sense of dispersion of the souls traveling throughout the whole universe. And that's also part of the Exodus, right? That's why the Shekinah, the divine feminine, is trying to be reconciled with the male, so that once that happens, the crown, which is the male, right? The king, and the female, which is the queen, the Shekinah. So once you have the two of them together, then balance and harmony will be the end product or the culmination of this spiritual journey throughout time and eternity. And the question is, of course, how do you think the Zohar deals with this question of repairing the wall of Tikkun Olam in the Jewish mystical tradition, with this idea of the importance of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the queen and the king coming together? How do you respond to that as a female free thinker?
For me, I think that I really liked that the Zohar put an emphasis on there being a feminine aspect to this, because like growing up as a Christian, personally, the churches I grew up in, I never seen that. It was always just the Godhead or the men, or just that masculine power. So seeing where there is the feminine divine and how important she is, I think that that's really important to me. I like how the Zohar also shows her motherly instincts to stay with her children, because I think that also just shows, for me, I guess it wouldn't maybe per se fit to all mothers, because there's different types of mothers out there, but for, a motherly mother, I think that it shows a lot of truth to how they are with their children, and they would follow them to the ends of the earth, even if it meant leaving the person they love behind. And I like that. And I really, really enjoyed the fact that the Zohar puts emphasis on the two energies being necessary for there to be balance. So it's not like one holds more strength or prominence than the other. They're both equal to have true balance. And I think that's important, because you can look at that from the mystic point of view, and you can also incorporate that into a relationship or into the way you just live your life, so that you recognize the balance that the feminine energy brings to the table, to balance the masculine energy, and how his energy can also balance her energy as well. So for me, I think that it was a fitting way of representing both male and female counterparts, and showing respect to both sides. So.
Thank you very much. And by the way, there are two great books addressing what she was talking about earlier on. This one is a classic book, The Tao of Physics by Frijo Capra. This is a classic book that brings spirituality and physics together through the Tao, the Tao of Physics, and it contains, sections on Buddhism and other traditions where they address, the importance of what they call the coincidence of opposites. And another book by Frijo Capra, the author of the Tao of Physics, is this one. It's called The Web of Life.
Yeah.
So this is another book where he talks about a new scientific understanding of living systems. And today we were talking about this in my other class on ecology and world religions, where we discussed the importance of deep ecology as a movement. So in this regard, I mean, the problem, of course, is if in the Jewish tradition they believe in Genesis and the creation story, how can that be reconciled with this idea that creation comes out of nothing?
Well, I think that you're looking at two different types of creation. You're looking at a cosmic creation and you're looking at a physical creation. So Genesis deals with the physical creation of humankind. It's not dealing with a cosmological creation. And I think that the reason the Zohar is able to pull this cosmological thought process from the Torah is because within the Torah there are little hints of this cosmological thought process of there being a cosmic consciousness hidden within it, because God is there from the beginning, and He, and we obviously we were created in God's image, and if God is consciousness, if God is not physical, and we're created in God's image, then if we're created in God's image, you're looking at one of two things. Either God is a physical human being that's going to die of old age, or God is cosmic consciousness, and we are created in God's image, which means we're cosmic consciousness. But the Genesis story is referring to the creation of the physical manifestation of human beings, not the cosmic consciousness of human beings. So I think when you look at the Genesis story, you're looking at the origins of humankind, not the origins of consciousness. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and of course there is room for creation, spirituality, and creation stories, of course, in the Jewish tradition, but from a mystical perspective, there is also room for looking at the narrative of nothingness as coming out of nothing, and that means that what if the universe is, and always will be, and if God is eternal or co-eternal with nature, then what if we are all co-partakers in building this heavenly kingdom here on earth, because we're all breaking vessels that need to be reunited in that which is and always will be, and it was. So in that regard, of course, the Jewish mystic is trying to reconnect that which has been fragmented and which has been lost. And this is what they call by the term tikkun olam, which in Hebrew is translated as repairing or healing the world, which is what Rhonda was talking about throughout her presentation. So there is a real call to action, right? There is a real call in the Jewish mystical tradition to be co-partakers and co-partners and co-responsible in the creation of the universe, because nothing is said and done with creation. Creation is always an ongoing process. So in that regard, what do you make in your personal readings of the Zohar? What do you learn from this human task of being co-partners with God in creating the universe?
So one of the things that I talked about in my paper and that I would think about in regards to this is that Zohar teaches that it's not necessarily us all working together. There's obviously going to be those parts of humanity that we're unable to convince to move in a different direction. but it talks about healing or making the change individually. So it's an individual task. So that's why the Zohar talks about meditating or prayer and focusing on the Torah, and through like meditations on the Torah and the Shekinah. It says one part of it is that if we meditate on Shekinah, we go to synagogue and you focus on the Torah and the readings and the lessons, and you meditate on those, that you're able to work yourself up the Sephirotic ladder. So you would start from the bottom up, and it's almost like the meditations of Buddhism is how I would see it. So it's through the meditations and you focusing on each of the individual Sephirots. It says that you can, through meditation, work yourself up to the very top. But it tells you that as you're meditating and you're focusing on these readings, and as you're learning how to, I would say, cross over this veil of physical self into consciousness self, it says that it's a dangerous path, because there's going to be, I guess I took it, when it talks about the dangers of this, I took it as dangers of the desires and the things that we're going to face head on. So essentially it tells us that through the mindfulness and through the meditation of the Sifrat, you're able to get to the point of Keter. And it says that once you reach that point, that your consciousness or yourself is able to reemerge, or to emerge with Keter, or with God, with nothingness. And for me, that particular type of process, I found a lot of Buddhism, because you would meditate, you would try to reach that point of awakening. And that is what it sounds like Moses de Leon was honestly mixing, all of the religions together, including Buddhism or some forms of Hinduism, to encourage his readers to mindfully meditate on the Torah and on the Shekinah and on the Sifrat, in order to overcome the desires of the world, to overcome the evils of the world. And if you're focusing on wisdom and love and strength and goodness, and if that's what you're allowing into your life, and if you are pushing away all of those human desires for the negative things, and if you do what's right, and you live by right actions and right words and right choices, according to the Zohar, you can reach a point of awakening where you could reemerge with God himself, or reemerge into nothingness. And with Buddhism, when they talk about that point of nothingness or awakening, to me it never made too much sense, because how could there be nothing? But I think that it's just that pure existence of having no desires to manifest yourself onto a physical plane, because you're no longer attached to the human desires of food or travel, or attachments to other people, or attachments to sensations, or physical sensations that we may crave. So I think that that's what the Torah is trying to teach us, is by focusing on God, by focusing on the Word of God, we're able to detach from those human desires to focus on God. And once we do that, we can overcome the desires to want to continue to partake in those human things that keep us bound to this earth. So.
King, I think, has her hand up, so please go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Pagan. Can you hear me okay? Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay. So I found a couple of things interesting in talking about your question on the co-creation between humanity and divinity. It's just interesting, because in my world, everything is connected. And just so happens this week, I'm reading Sumerian texts, which are about 2,000 years older than the Hebrew texts. And it just so happens that the term Shekinah comes up in those texts. And Rhonda, you may be interested in this, especially the divine feminine. I'm reading this book right here called Inanna, and it's called Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, Her Stories and Hymns from Sumer. And it's wild because a lot of the Jewish texts were inspired by the Sumerians. And it's just in that region, the Mesopotamian region. You're talking about Iraq, Persia, Babylon, all of that, all the way down to the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf. So there was a lot of influence from those texts within the Jewish texts. And so I find it interesting that, Shekinah came up because Shekinah is actually a moon goddess in the Sumerian literature, going back to Inanna. And Inanna was like one of the greatest female deities. But as far as the co-creation, what you were speaking about, Dr. Saram Pagan, what made me think of this and connect this Jewish mysticism and what Rhonda is talking about, as far as like the individual responsibility. One of the stories that I read this week from Inanna was about her facing her fears and her fears and desires, and those fears and desires manifested in her as the snake, Lilith, and this Anzu bird in this tree. And it has to do with like the creation story, even though the creation story is different from what the Zohar offers, being that, there's no creation, it's just everything comes out of nothingness, which in a sense, that's a paradox, because that is a sense of creation in itself, even though it's not. But those things manifested in her, and she had to deal with those things first in her before she could actually do what she was, be who she was, come into what she was, which was really a deity. She was already a deity. But she had to come into that deity, or become aware that she was that deity, through the process of her dealing with these manifestations of herself, which was her fears and desires. And once she did that, it ended up helping the people of Sumer. And so I think that kind of plays into what you're saying about, this responsibility, this relationship between humanity and divinity and co-creation. As Rhonda mentioned about it beginning with the individual, yes, but when that begins with the individual, it's like there's something supernatural that lends itself to those that are around us, including like the community, society, and even the nations. Like it's something that happens when we walk in that place based on these texts that we're reading here, whether it's Inanna, the Jewish mystical texts, and even, the Old Testament writings. These are all symbols that we're reading about that unveil deeper meaning. And so I think that plays into it, that whole co-creation between divinity and humanity. And I think that, Rhonda, you did a great job. Congratulations on your presentation. But yeah, it is individual, but yet it's collective at the same time.
I really like to hear that. I wasn't aware of that. That sounds very interesting.
Rhonda, something's wrong with your mic. It's directional. When you lean forward, we can't hear anything. When you lean back, it's great. I don't know what that is.
Is that better? Okay. So yeah, I was just saying that I thank you, Kim, for sharing that. I think that was very interesting, and I do want to purchase that book. So I like that a lot. Thank you for sharing that.
And just an idea to contemplate, especially coming from the Jewish tradition. Of course, the covenantal relationship is crucial to understand relationships between God and humans and nature. But in this case, of course, even in the Zohar, there is a covenantal relationship. And of course, they talk about Israel. The word Israel in Hebrew is translated as wrestling with. In this case, of course, is wrestling with God from within. So to wrestle with means to try to really understand your connection, your deeper connection to that which is no other than God, right? Or the Godhead in this case. So if we have a covenantal relationship between humans and God, where this not only individual but social or collective responsibility comes to the front when God called us to partake even in creation. And that means that we have to be co-partakers in the cosmic drama of unfolding a universe within a universe within a universe.
Fractals.
Yeah, that's true. It goes back to your fractals. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Did Kim not sound like she was an intellectual Harvard student to you? She sounded very Harvard-like to me. I was very impressed with that.
I'm not. Do not give me credit. I promise I'm not. I'm struggling my way through this.
But it's struggle that's going to make you come out like excellent. So I look forward to that.
Next meeting is our panel group. Is that correct? I think Bonnie was gonna ask Dr. Bird, get her to verify that she's going to be there and give her a question. The idea is that we're giving the questions to the panelists before they come, and so that they can prepare an answer for the question that she's going to ask as a moderator. I kind of veered off from what we were talking about. I apologize for that, but I did want to mention it before I forgot about it. So excuse me for that.
Yeah, and by the way, I just stopped the recording since we are moving into a different direction. And just to ask, Rhonda, do you give us permission to convert this recorded video tape and put it in YouTube? Good. So, and I will also, once we have the final version, we will put it also in our website in Teams. So you will have it in Teams and in YouTube. But yeah, Bonnie, what do you mind to remind us who were the people who say yes, so we can start sending emails and organizing that event for early April?
I only have Dr. Bird and I think Dr. Williams for the panel discussion.
So Dr. Bird comes from History Department.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Williams comes from the English Department. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
So then we have the two humanities. And then, yeah, I contact Dr. Hochschild from Sociology Department. So he has to confirm, but if he doesn't, there is a person also in his department that can be part of the social sciences. So let me see, I'm just looking for the names here that I wrote down. Let me see if I can find it quickly.
When they confirm, would you mind letting me know so that we can add their names to any kind of advertising or from, I send out my little emails and remind everybody that we're having the meetings. I like to put the names on there for that.
Yeah, definitely. We will do that. Oh, I have it here. Yeah, put it in a different section. Okay. So yeah, I have Dr. Hochschild as a possibility, but if he cannot make it, it will be Dr. Sarah Davis. Sarah K. Davis from her, I think it's the same department, sociology. And then my other colleague that I just saw in San Agustin, Florida, just last week, and I invited him. So I'm going to send him an email just to confirm that he will be able to be part of the panel discussion, which is Carl Colavito. He teaches political science political science at Florida State College at Jacksonville in Florida. So he could be the fourth panelist. So in other words, what we have is probably 2 people from the humanities and 2 people from the social sciences. It probably will be Dr. Bird and Dr. Williams representing the humanities, and then Dr. Hochschild and Dr. Colavito as part of the social sciences.
Okay, well, we weren't really envisioning like a game show panel, but we were going to have Bonnie ask them some questions. I don't know, maybe it's a courtesy when they confirm, we could tell them generally what kind of questions she was going to ask or something. Or we can just hit them out of the blue with it. They would probably have good answers anyway, so either way would work.
I know that with what you recommended with sending them a bunch of questions and asking if they can choose two, Dr. Bird and Dr. Williams has already responded to that. Do I like direct the question to like whoever like whichever one they chose and just ask it and then they answer and then someone can comment on that? Is that how it's supposed to work?
I guess so. Yeah, you're the parliamentarian and conduct officer, so I think you should be in rule with an iron fist and tell them to answer those questions. I think that, I guess, Dr. Pagan hopefully will do he always does a wonderful warm up, and then probably hand it off to you to ask them some questions, and you could just, introduce them the question, ask them what they thought, and let them answer. They will have a well thought out question that way, and they won't have any excuses for, I wasn't thinking.
Yeah, because I think if I remember correctly, the main reason why we wanted to have a panel discussion on the humanities and the social sciences is to address the importance, right? The importance of having the two together. So the two colleges, actually in our at VSU, we have the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, right? They go hand in hand. So, but the question is, the bigger question for the public, for the audience is, in which ways do you think that humanities and the social sciences should actually help people be very well-rounded citizens of the United States? Why people who even study sciences should study humanities, and why people who study humanities should study the sciences? So that is, I think, what the main panel discussion should be about. And then we can allow them even to ask the question to each other, since they represent different departments and different.
Oh, very good. Yeah, very good.
Different, departments and different humanities and social sciences are like kind of different. It could be also independent at some point, but yeah, the question is how helpful it would be for well-rounded students to get an exposure to the humanities and also an exposure to the social sciences.
We could give you a whistle, Dr. Pagan, and you could blow the whistle if they get out of line, or when time's up, or
a boxing match.
Go to neutral corners and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of a thing of balance, like Rhonda was talking about there just a minute ago. We're talking about balance in society. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun.
So yeah, I probably will send an email to individually to all of them, just to, if you can also contact your professors, but just to confirm, but I will send them also a note, because I'm a friend with all of them. All of them are my good friends, Dr. Bird, Dr. Williams, and Dr. Hochschild, and Dr. Colavito. So all of them are friends of mine. I can also contact them individually and see what is, and then you can explain what is going to be the format about. But we need really confirmation, because the event is April 5th, right?
Yes, sir.
So April 5th, yeah, which is around the corner. If you really think about it, we have no more than 3 weeks to put everything together. And then the last event is easy, because she has been part of VSU, and she will just simply have an introduction to Unitarian Universalist church principles, and what is a little bit, she will give us a little bit of the history of the background of how their church came, into origins, and then she will talk about how important are those principles for us today, right? How they apply even to the civil rights movement and other things. So yeah, I think we pretty much, believe it or not, we are going to conclude with the academic year in less than a month, which is incredible. So I know that everyone is busy. I think Rhonda did a great job presenting this very difficult. It's a very difficult topic. Not everyone, not even Hebrew, Jewish and people who know Hebrew understand this, but she, I think, did a great job explaining all of these complexities in the Zohar, and we're looking forward to our future guest speakers. Everyone is invited for this Thursday to attend this wonderful, also told by Dr. Rita Sharma, on ecological feminisms from a Hindu perspective. She's a Hindu ecofeminist herself. She teaches classes in Berkeley at the Graduate Theological Union on ecology and spirituality. And she's the director of the Dharma studies, which means the Buddhist and Hindu studies. So she's one of the top-notch scholars in the American, excuse me, or American Academy of Religion. So I hope that many of you can make it, because I think it's going to be also a very important evening, and that will bring also a good name to our club. By the way, everyone is very happy of all the things that we were able to accomplish this year. I just heard from the chair of my department, Dr. Downing, that he was very proud that of all our work, and we were able to bring, people like Dr. Susanna Heschel in the past, and Dr. Gramber, Wes Gramber Michelson, and Dr. Holland, and many others. And I don't know if you have followed in the news, but Reverend Gramber Michelson was in the news lately because, as I told you, you remember he was not able to come to Dr. Holland's presentation because he was part of the World Council of Churches writing a letter to the leader of the Russian church, the Orthodox Russian church. So they actually finished the letter that day, and they sent it to the to the public and to the Russian leader, and his name was one of the top names that came out of that letter.
Hey, Dr. Pagan, do you know anything about that letter and what they are trying to do in that particular respect with the church?
Yeah, I read it, and of course I know a little bit of the context, but basically it was an attempt to persuade the Russian Orthodox leader to speak against this war, and to stop the war, to make an effort to persuade Putin that this war must stop. So that was the real goal and intention of the letter, to have an interfaith ecumenical approach so that we can actually do something about it. Because think about it. I mean, this is crazy. The majority of Russians are Orthodox Christians. The majority of Ukrainians are Orthodox Christians. And now the two countries are fighting, and they're all brothers and sisters to each other. How this can happen? How this is even allowed? This is crazy.
It's
and
not
people actually
popular war in Russia even. I mean, if the church turned against it, Putin could have a very tough road to hoe. I mean, it might be tough on him.
Yeah, unfortunately, only 350 Russian Orthodox Christians spoke against this war, but that's a minority. But many people are silent for many different reasons. They live in fear. They also fear of losing power. They don't want to talk about, they don't want to oppose Putin because they know that Putin will go against them very quickly. But the truth is, and the matter is, that the Russian leader, Cyril, is one with Putin's war, and that's part of the problem. So they have been supporting this war, and of course, from the intention of the letter is to remind this leader that the Bible, right, the Bible and the Christian tradition actually stand on peace and on Christ, who is the King of peace, not the King of war.
That makes me think of what Susanna Heschel had said before, when she said that her research had taken her into, and I read a little bit about this as well, but I think it was in Germany, the church actually was supporting Hitler's choices, and there was a lot of documents and so forth that proved that the church was actually in line with and agreement with Hitler. And I know that, and it definitely, I get it, it's not the same, but it does seem very similar, like parallels with what Putin is doing to those people, or the Ukrainian people, that a lot of people on social media have been making a lot of parallels to him and Hitler, you just wouldn't think that something like this would happen in our day and time. And now here it is. And I think this is just an opportunity for people to realize that nowhere is safe. Like, we can pretend like we're safe in America or in whatever country you're from, but in reality, if there's one person who wants to dictate or have a certain level of power or take something for themselves, all it takes is them doing it, and nobody's really safe. It's all about power. So.
And of course, when we say church, we have to be careful because, of course, not all people who represent the church actually agree, right? But definitely there were people in both in the Protestant and in the Catholic Church who were actually supporters of Hitler's regime. That's for sure. We know that there is plenty of evidence to prove it. In fact, the Catholic Church in Germany was very close to Hitler's regime, and also Protestant Lutherans and others were also very close to the regime. But it's like in Spain with Franco and the Catholic Church. They were very close to each other. And this is the main reason why in Spain, many people actually stopped going to churches. They stopped being Christians because they saw the connection between the Franco dictatorship and the Catholic Church. And it was so close and so supportive of each other that now, of course, many people don't want to know anything about being Catholic anymore because of that connection. This is why Spain has become a very secular country.
Yeah, but every Catholic church or cathedral that I've been to has been absolutely beautiful in Spain. I went to them in Portugal, and they're very poor and run down, and there is nothing like a cathedral in Spain. They're the most beautiful things you'll set your eyes on. So definitely.
And of course, even in the Catholic Church in Spain, there were people who were very critical of Franco and critical of that, coalition between the two. But of course, many of them were living also in fear, and they were persecuted. Many of them were killed during the Spanish Civil War. So, it's a history of polarization, like we have seen recently in the United States and around the globe. The polarization is real and it exists. But unfortunately, yeah, I mean, can you believe it? How can we allow these people to bomb hospitals for maternity and shelters for women and children? In the last bomb, that they have even written down in the buildings, children, there are children in this building. Guess what? They couldn't find not even one survivor. All of them were children and babies.
It's inhumane. All of it is inhumane.
It's crazy.
It's completely inhumane.
Yeah, it's sad, it's crazy, and I feel impotent, of course, because I wish I would have superpowers and stop this nonsense, but we are all limited in our capacity. But of course, we can always do more and put pressure and contact our leaders and do we can provide money and support organizations that take care of refugees and people who are suffering the consequences of this illegal invasion and legal occupation. And by the way, the language is incredible. He's using the same language like the Chinese did in Tibet. It's very interesting. He said, Ukrainians are not Ukrainians. Ukraine belong always to Russia, like the Chinese have the same argument with Tibet. Isn't that incredible? They're using the same language, the same narrative.
So I remember when the wall came down and the Soviet Union dissolved, and I was working nights part-time at a pizza parlor because I was doing things in the daytime, and my daughter was, and these three guys would always show up in the evenings, and they were kind of dressed in old and they long shaggy hair, and they had these heavy accents, and they would get a pizza and they would stand in front of the pizza place and drink beer and eat pizza. And I started talking to them one night, and they had these, and I asked them, I said, "Are you Russian?" They got really incensed. They were Ukrainian. Those guys in no way ever thought that there was anything about them that was Russian at all. And Russia's done some terrible stuff to Ukraine historically. I mean, that's no question in their minds that they're not Russian. They don't think they're Russian.
Not only in Ukraine, but that's the same feeling in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, you name it, all those countries. That's why this is the reason why in Europe many people are fearful, because they know that the Soviets, when they invaded, they rape their women. They kill people brutally. I mean, it was brutal. They oppress people. They took their liberties away. They don't want to see that again. That's why they are fighting for their lives, because they prefer to die in liberty than to give Putin whatever he wants and conquer them and put a puppet in power who is going to indoctrinate and brainwash people with their Russian propaganda. And that's what it really, this is the main reason why there are so many civilians join the resistance and fighting back for their country and for their liberties, because they don't want Russia at all. They hate Russia in this case. Not the Russians, but they hate the Putin's regime and what they're trying to do, which brings memories of World War II and what they did in Europe. Because at the end of the day, they also understand that not all Russians are on the same boat. But the truth is, and the matter is that in terms of statistics, the last numbers I saw is that almost 70% of Russians support Putin. And that's a big number.
No, I don't think they're being told the story there in Russia. I don't think the public knows that.
Yeah.
And that Ukraine is the country where we told them to please give up your nuclear weapons when you broke off, because don't worry, the world will protect you. And I'm not sure if that's happening. They surrendered their nuclear weapons when the Soviet Union dissolved, and with an assurance that they would not be, what's happening to them right now would not happen. It's not a very happy topic. I'm sorry.
No. And at the end of the day, of course, I think it's all about money, like always. It's money and power. It go hand in hand. Why Ukraine is important? Clearly, like because of Iraq and other places. We wanted, of course, to invade those places because they are important for our distribution of oil and natural gas, and we need pipelines. By having pipelines through Ukraine, actually it's cheaper and more efficient to distribute the gas quicker and without any Ukraine telling us that we cannot have those pipelines through their homeland. So this is why I think Putin make a clear calculation here. He thought to himself, oh, wow, wouldn't it be better just to control the whole country so I don't have to even negotiate and deal with these Ukrainians, right? I'm going to do it myself. I'm just going to conquer, invade the place, and then make profits for me and for my oligarchs who are, running the natural gas and the oil companies. And that's what it is. Who cares if we kill thousands of civilians and children and women? It's all about oil and natural gas. I mean, I have no hesitation. That's the main reason. And now, of course, geopolitics play a role because, of course, if you control that region, guess what? You control also the seas and the distribution of oil and natural gas through both earth and water. So you need both.
Dr. Swampagan, I'm not really educated on this idea of ecology, but what I do understand, it sounds like this kind of plays a part in that. And that word seems to keep coming up with, I don't remember his name, that we had the last time, the gentleman that spoke to us the last time. And then again, it's coming up again with the next speaker that we have. And I wanted to ask you a question, not to change the subject, because I think that it kind of plays into it, but I just don't know necessarily how. That what exactly is meant by that in religious studies or in philosophy to use the term ecology, because I'm seeing that as a scientific word. I looked it up, and it means conservation and preservation. So can you explain that to me briefly? I know that we're done with this session, but it keeps coming up, and I want to have a better understanding of that.
Yes, the speaker was Dr. Joe Holland, but yeah, basically the word ecology comes from Greek. Those Greeks invented everything, like my big fat, like the movie, right? My big fat Greek wedding.
Greek wedding.
The father said everything was invented by the Greeks. In a way, yes.
And Windex heals everything.
Exactly, on Windex. But yeah, the word eco means home. Eco means home, and the study of the house, the management of the house is what ecology literally means. And the reason why nowadays we have many authors using the word ecological spirituality is because they want to see that ecology is not just a scientific enterprise, but actually ecology goes hand in hand with spirituality, because the engaged spirituality deals with the earth, it deals with relationship, it doesn't escape from their own obligation. And that's why ecofeminists, especially ecofeminists like Sally McFake and many others, Ruder, right, Rosemary Ruder, and now Rita Sharma and many others, advocate for, I mean, the ecofeminists claim that the oppression of Mother Earth is the same oppression for women. And historically, that's accurate. I think their analysis is accurate and truthful, that the way Mother Earth has been oppressed by humans, in this case, of course, by males, is the same treatment and way that women have been oppressed for thousands of years by males, by patriarchal structures.
So if someone is studying not ecofeminism, but if someone is studying spiritual ecology, what does that look like?
Yeah, basically it's an attempt to see how we can manage our relationships with Mother Earth, right? Especially through what we call either spiritual or religious traditions. So usually you start with, like, for example, when I teach ecology and world religion, I always start with indigenous cultures, right? So we cover how different Aborigines and Native American traditions and indigenous cultures around the globe show us a way of how to live in balance and in harmony with nature. And then we move to Asian traditions. So we go through the Hindu, the Buddhist, the Jains, the Confucianists, the Taoists, and the Zen Buddhist, and the Shinto. And then we move to the West and cover especially Christianity, but of course, briefly making relationship to the Jewish, the Muslims, and sometimes the Zoroastrians as well. So all of them have their own records, a good record also in their sacred texts and narratives on how to live in harmony with nature. All of them coincide and agree. But the problem is that there have been gaps in between, misrepresentation and misunderstandings of the sacred text. And suddenly the word even dominion, right, becomes control over nature and control over all her species in the hands of humans, and then more narrowed down in the hands of men and more white men. And that means oppression.
And that's how we get this situation. Then that's how it would be connected. That imbalance is how that could be, that idea or those theories can be applied to what's happening then with.
Exactly. And that goes back to the
Okay.
Zohar and to the idea of fragmentation and the breaking the vessels and the effort to bring Shekinah back to the world, because Shekinah is living in exile like the Jewish. They have been kicked out for thousands of years. So there is an attempt to recover, to regain, to reinstate the balance. Because if we don't have the king and the queen working together in balance, like the male and the female, by the way, the male and the female is in all of us because they are
Right.
cosmic energies. So what we need to do, all of us, is to work our energies so that we can bring balance. And by bringing balance, we will bring peace to the whole world. Because what is missing, the problem is that what is missing is that many of us are fragmented and we are not able to keep the balance between the two energies together.
So what I'm hearing you say then is it seems that there needs to be um, a going back into those indigenous cultures and a studying of the sacred texts from those perspectives to bring a physical balance in the earth realm from a cosmological eternal realm. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
And yes, that will be only one, of course, one possibility. There are many possibilities, but that's
Right.
one major one. Yes, one major way of recovering that lost balance is to return to the sacred text and to the sacred traditions and to the spiritual traditions of the world, where we can again be reminded, we can relearn the wisdom that have been lost.
Right, because what's happened, what I notice, and I could be totally wrong because I've only been in this thing for 5 years now. You've been in this probably for, I don't know, 20 or 30, maybe more, I don't know. But it seems to me that there's been an evolution in religion, and much of what was meant during the writings of these texts have been, I don't want to say misplaced, but subdued. Um, and it's become more about power or money, and maybe not in all the religions. I can't put them all together, but I know just from my own personal experience in the Western cultures, it seems to be that way. Um, that that evolution from the sacred text, from the heart of those sacred texts, the initiative of that, and that space and time, has transformed into, you know, many things. I mean, not just money, power, but a lot of things in the sense of control. And that's why we can have Orthodox Christians fighting against Orthodox Christians, because if there was the revelation of what the initiatives were on those sacred texts, we wouldn't be having this issue.
I agree with you 100% on everything you just said. I think you were, I mean, from my perspective, I think you were dead on with what you just said. So,
Well, I don't know. This is just my observation. Dr. Sarampagan, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, the problem with interpretations and abusing the narrative text, right, the sacred text, is I mean, is evident. That has been part of the problem, because they have distorted, they have hijacked the name of religion and the name of God. And by
Yes.
the way, that goes even against their own precepts and principles, because we're
It goes
supposed not to,
against the words that they're reading.
exactly, and we're not supposed to use the name of God in vain. And that's what they are doing. They're using God, like Putin. I mean, Putin is the perfect example. He's using
Mhm.
religion and he's using God for his own power
Just
and
like Hitler.
control.
It's just like Hitler. It is
Yeah,
so much like what I've studied in the Jewish traditions. I
yes,
mean, it mirrors it,
yeah. And by the way,
identical. It's the same spirit.
and ironically, the president of Ukraine is Jewish, and he said that he was going to Ukraine to fight against the neo-Nazis because they were killing their pro-Russians. I mean, how stupid that comment is when we know that the president to begin with is Jewish. He is a survivor. His grandfather actually lost 3 brothers in the Holocaust. And then Putin is saying that he's going to Ukraine just to save as a peacemaker. He said, I'm going there as a peacemaker, and then he changed the language and he said, oh, this is a special operation, just bombing everyone, including civilians. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, and if anyone trusts this guy, in my opinion, it's a guilty bystander.
Hmm. So then it seems, because I'm trying to, grasp an understanding of this, is ultimately I'm going to have to narrow down, you know, in what context I'm going to study comparative religions. And I can't move away from sacred text. I am drawn to it. I'm drawn to the language. I'm thinking I'm probably going to have to learn Sanskrit because I'm drawn to it, which God help me,
Oh,
because I think that is way harder than Hebrew and Greek.
yeah.
But um, it seems to me that in the academic realm, it's important to study these ancient religions, because I've had people, ask me, why in the world would you study something as ancient as that? Like, how is that going to help us today? And so it's me asking you these questions and you answering them is helping me to understand why this would, be important, in the academic realm, to bring out these ancient cultures and to study these ancient cultures, and how, I mean, just in reading this Anana, I was blown away. And I ended up writing my discussion this week on the fact of how something so ancient, so old that was literally carved in stone in cuneiform, not even a writing like words. It was pictures,
Yeah.
and how it unveils humanness and the human reality that is continuing today.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a human problem.
Yeah, the Sumerians were the architects of what we call Western civilization, and many of our creation stories come from them. We know that. Even the story of the fall, the flood, all those stories
Yeah,
were part of the Sumerian tradition and the Sumerian civilization. And what these other traditions did was to copy and paste certain parts, and also to change the language to fit into their own, narrative. And that's the originality of each tradition. But yeah, they pick it up from the Sumerians and they made it their own versions, which of course the Sumerians put also more emphasis on the goddess, right?
yes,
They have gods and
yes,
goddesses. And what the Jewish, of course,
yes.
tradition did was to
The men.
eradicate that goddess from their roots. So you
Yep,
get rid of the goddess, and then it make it a
yep,
patriarchal society. And then Christians come, and
yep,
as an organized religion, they pick up from the Jewish, and then Muslims
yep.
pick it up from Jewish and Christians.
Yeah, because the Shekinah in the Old Testament is male, even though it's not male.
Yeah,
It's never been male. It's always been female.
yeah,
But it was made male. It was made to be an attribute of God. When the glory of God, when the Shekinah comes into the temple, in the robe, in the temple, and but it's been an attribute of a male deity and
yeah,
not what it was. Like the Shekinah has been stripped of her identity through the patriarchal um, paradigms in the West,
exactly.
and it's mind blowing to me. I read a little bit about it, and I researched it, and when I did, God the Mother, but this book, Rhonda, you're gonna really like that book. I'll send it to you over that chat that you and I have. But it has really, opened my eyes to so much of where we got our literature from, and what we've been serving and worshiping, and how there's a whole aspect of that that has been completely missing, that's been taken away, and it's that feminism part. But anyway, I needed to understand the ecology because I felt like I understood it, but I'm not familiar with that word. And when Dr. Holland came on and was talking about spiritual ecology, I said, "Oh my gosh, that is so me. That is 100% something that I enjoy and I'm drawn to." But I just didn't understand, how that was fitting. The word ecology was fitting with something spiritual. It just didn't seem to fit.
Yeah, and remember, even Reverend Gramber Michelson said in his presentation, and which of course I talked to him about this, so that's why he brought the issue, which is the Bible. Actually, they did a research at Harvard, and Desmond Tutu, by the way, was the one who wrote the preface to this Bible, to this new revised version of the Bible. They highlighted every single passage that is green, right, that has to do with nature and the earth. And guess what? More than
Hmm.
65% of the Bible is green.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I could see it. I mean, I studied it for 20 years,
Yeah.
and not in that aspect, but going back, it's like Dory off of Nemo. I don't know if you've seen that yet, but you probably will when your little one gets older. But it's like, oh yeah, all these things, these memories keep coming back. So yeah, I can trace it, throughout the Bible, of how
And
many
of course,
times it's there.
your focus in terms of the academic side, you can approach it from many different angles and perspectives. So always, what I will recommend is don't make also your life miserable because you have limited time. So you have to
Yeah.
really focus on something that you think that you feel more comfortable and is more realistic, so that you can also always approach these topics from many different angles and perspectives, including your faith tradition. So if you have already the advantage of having the language and the understanding of one, there is always room for doing comparative study without even knowing the Sanskrit or other languages.
Yes, yes. No, that's actually wise. That is very wise, and that just confirms what other professors and friends of mine, have stated too. And I know, I mean, I did it. It's like, second nature to me. Is I go into the Hebrew language and I pull it apart, and I go in like a bioluminescent fish down to the deep end, and when I pull it apart, I see things, and that's how I've been able to know what I've known. That's how when I went into college, I knew what I knew. It was from that space. And like right now, I'm studying sound, and I'm looking at it from the Hebrew perspective, from the word sound in the Bible, which is the word kol, and it translates voice. And so, like for instance, when Adam and Eve heard the sound of God walking in the garden, that word sound means voice.
Mm,
When Elijah was, when he was hiding in the cave from Jezebel, and he was crying out to God, and he was looking for God in the thunder and the lightning and the storm and all of this. And it says that then there was this, in the stillness, there was this sound in the stillness. Well, that word stillness even translates like a thunderous voice. And it was, what it's saying is it was coming up from within. It was
yeah,
this sound coming from within. So that's my, column A, that the lens that I'm looking through, but I'm looking at sound in Hinduism as well, because there's something about, and something very spiritual and sacred that I can't verbalize, about Om and the sound of the universe. I don't understand it as well in Hinduism, but I understand it in Hebrew, and I'm trying to compare that sound in Hebrew. Even though it's totally different, it's very much the same, but they're saying it different.
yeah. And
Um,
all the great mystics talk about it. Even St. John of the Cross used the expression in his poems and his prose. He said, there is a silent music. So the silent music is the voice of God from within and throughout the whole creation. So that there is a paradoxical statement of keeping the silence, but that silence actually speaks through music. And the
it's
music
a
is, of course,
sound.
the sound, which is what
Yeah.
even Pythagoras, in the pre-Socratic tradition, he even said the universe is like a symphony and an orchestra of many different voices flowing through the string of consciousness of the universe.
Yes. Yes. And
So,
yes, you're right.
so he actually said in a more mystical way, the heavenly spheres are music to my ears.
Hmm. Yeah. So I don't know how I'm going to go about doing it, but that what you said about, going in and, you have limited time, which they give me 5 years. I don't want to do it in 5 years. I would prefer to do it in 3 years, but I seem to be drawn to the Hebrew language more so than the Greek. The Greek just confuses me. I
Yeah.
can do it, but I don't want to do it.
Make your life simple. Don't you have limited time. Languages are hard to, especially those languages that you're talking about, Sanskrit, I mean, Greek, all these languages are hard to learn if it takes years to master them, and you don't have that luxury. So what I will recommend is, of course, be at home with what you know that you can do good, and then move from there. And you can always do comparisons between different traditions. You don't have to do it simply just from one sacred uh, sacred text to another, but you can do it even with people or with different symbols. So you don't have to even delve into their language or into their sacred text.
Okay. No, that's very good. I appreciate that. I don't get to have that one-on-one, online at Harvard. I wished I did. We've got 2.5 hours, and you've got, I don't know, 27, 32 people, and I haven't gotten an advisor yet I will after this semester, but I don't have one yet. But I'm always thinking ahead, and something that Dr. Holland said about the spiritual ecology just really got my attention. And there's something very special to me about the indigenous ways and going back to that. And so Hebrew indigenous people, the language itself, there's something very spiritual and mesmerizing about that to me, that relates to me, that I can understand.
Yeah,
Um,
and one way to do that even is through Heschel.
I love Heschel. I love
Yeah.
Heschel.
And by the way, I forgot. I'm giving a talk on Heschel on Thursday after my class. I was invited to give a talk at the Spiritual Retreat Center in Syracuse, New York. So they have a website where people can register. In this case, I think they ask for some money, but I think it's also they ask for donations. So if you cannot pay $20, you can always register and pay whatever you want to pay for this event. But it's going to be this Thursday from now I forgot the time, but it's in the afternoon. I think it's from 6:30 to probably 8. So we will have a Zoom
I have class that
version.
night at 7:20, but I do
Yeah.
plan to do I am planning to be present in the classroom that
Great.
from 2 to 3:30, but then I have class and my TA gets on at like 6:30, 6:40, and so I have to log on, and then we have class from 7:20 to sometimes 10 o'clock at night. So
And by the way, King and Rhonda, both of you should be actually in contact with this professor because she's great. She's really, she can help you in your academic life. She's very a wonderful human being, very spiritual woman, and we became friends through Facebook. And I know that she will do a good job on Thursday, but also she can help you and guide you with all these questions that you were asking me because of course she had also the experience and she comes from a Hindu tradition, but she was raised in Canada. So she was actually
oh wow.
in Canada when I think she was born in Canada when her parents came from India. And then she moved to California and she's now in Berkeley. So you should be in contact with her and ask her questions and even exchange email information so that, you can be in contact because this type of scholars and professors can help a great deal.
Yeah, no, I believe that, and I plan to be there, and I appreciate you having all the different people, professors and not professors, students, because we're all learning something from each other.
That's right.
I mean, Rhonda did a whole section that I didn't even do in my Jewish mysticism because you don't have time, and taking on the project that she did. I mean, I looked at that and I said, I don't know how anyone can do this in one semester. When you get into this fraud, I mean, that's like getting into the chakras.
Yeah.
And I'm such a deep thinker that I would have gotten lost at Keter. I would have like, okay, let's just write this paper on Keter. So.
But yeah, what I'm planning to do is once I have time, because I have to now run actually home and help my wife with Marquito, who by the way, today he turned 8 months old. So I cannot wait to see him. But basically, I will download it. I will convert it to YouTube, and then I will post it both in our website in Teams and also in YouTube. And by the way, that will help you, Rhonda, a great deal because in the future, if they ask you for evidence of your scholarly work, you can tell that you were presenting through our club at VSU. You can tell that you got your article accepted for publication at the Omnino. All those things help. All those things help.
Yeah, go ahead and create you as a word of advice if you haven't done it already. Go ahead and start creating now because you will forget. It's so hard to backtrack everything you've done, but create yourself a curriculum vitae so that regardless of where you go, you can just keep up with it because before you know it, I swear mine's like 7 pages long.
Yeah.
So yeah, and thank goodness I did it. I went, I took Dr. Lovern and Dr. Downing's advice like my second year and started on it.
Yeah, that's very important.
I mean, I have a resume, but I don't have that, so I will make a note real quick to do that this week.
Yeah, I remember when I was a graduate student, I wrote down all the titles of all my presentation, all my papers.
Yep.
And when I applied to graduate programs, I have the whole thing already written down.
And I talked to one of the advisors for your application process at Harvard because that's where I'm at right now. I've got until April 15th to get my application in, but I was telling her about the curriculum vitae because what I did is every paper I wrote, I literally put in there what I'm arguing. I put in there, what that paper was about, just 2 lines, because that way when they go to place me, they'll, or advise me, they can look at everything that I've done and maybe they can see something that I didn't see and, kind of direct me like, Kim, you're really interested in this. I think you should stick with this, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, you only include your actual published papers in there, right? You don't just put anything on there.
I put everything I wrote.
Oh, did you? Okay, even if you didn't.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I did. I had publications under publications. I had presentations under presentations, awards under awards, and skills under skills, education under education. But there was a section where I put I don't remember how I worded it, but I just put topics of interest or papers of interest or whatever. And I literally went back in my computer and every single paper I wrote during college, I put it in there.
Mm.
As far as like religious studies, not like, well, I didn't do like all the poetry that I wrote that I didn't publish.
Yeah.
I didn't do that, but anything related to my field, which is religious studies or philosophy, it's in there.
Okay, that's good to know. I have a website that I created, but I have it closed down right now because I wanted to go back and like re-edit everything. And that's where I was putting all of my work so that it was an easy access to like a, I don't know, like a resume, kind of like an online source of resume. But I have to go fix that. So I recently stopped working at the company I was working for because I needed to focus more on this stuff. So.
Oh, and that will give you also time, because in the meantime, you can even put, for example, the YouTube video that we will have, you can put the link next to your presentation so that people can even
they can
click
watch it
and watch it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they will have a visual thing with you and they will know how you think.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your interest and all of that. All these little things, it seems like it's not important, but it really helps. It open doors.
Mm-hmm.
It can also close doors, but it can open doors.
That's true. Yes, it could close doors, but I do worry sometimes about my interest and people not taking to them kindly, but we'll see.
Yeah. But of course, it's better to be transparent and have that in your record so that who knows? I mean, if someone doesn't, it doesn't get in. I mean, it doesn't approve what you are doing or saying. Better to know now, know when you are already inside, and then make your life miserable.
Yes. Yes. That is very true, because I'm still asking myself, do I really want to do this Harvard education? Because you're just like a nail on the wall, I mean, it's difficult, It really is. I love everything I'm learning, but it's just a different atmosphere.
Yeah,
And I think
impersonal.
different. I think very deep, and I come from that perspective, and a lot of my colleagues, like, it's just like this. I don't know. It's just shallow. I don't mean to judge it in any kind of way. That's their take on it. But I ask myself all the time, do I fit here? Like, am this where I'm supposed to be?
And of course, you are doing also online, which you don't have that kind of. If you will be in Harvard, living in Boston, in Cambridge, and going to classes and meeting people every day, that will be a different experience. But of course, you are also doing online, which affects the whole quality of your program.
Yes, it does. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get a teacher's assistantship. They do offer those. They offer research assistantships and teacher assistantships, because I'm hoping that will, have me closer with some of these professors to communicate. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. But good luck to both of you. I have to run now before
Y'all have a good night.
Throw me from the house.
From the roof.
Yes. Yeah, because she was exhausted last night.
You guys have a good night.